Warning: this podcast contains descriptions of events that may be upsetting. Please take care while listening.
This is the greatest tragedy that can be inflicted upon a person. Parents who took their children to college in a truck filled with moving boxes had to bring them home in hearses lined with coffins. No parent should ever have to bury their child.
Judge Hippler was the last to speak at Bryan Kohberger's sentencing hearing. The words you just heard perfectly sum up a day that was all about impact and loss. It was a gut-wrenching morning, and it was all on camera. It became what might be one of the most talked about sentencing hearings in modern history. The day after the hearing, I sat down with KBOI's legal correspondent, Ryan Black, to talk about everything that had happened and what to expect next.
I'm ready.
Do you want the other chair?
I'm good.
Okay.
Happy camper.
I was expecting more, knowing you were going to come in today, for there to be more legal stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of what we saw yesterday was a lot more just, it was the emotion of all of it.
100%.
He's still parts of me I may never get back. He took the version of me who didn't constantly ask, what if it happens again? What if next time I don't survive?
This was the first time, we even saw Judge Hippler crying on the bench, kept wiping tears away, things like that. I guess we'll just dive right in. What was kind of your takeaways from the sentencing hearing?
Yeah, I think you put it pretty well as far as the idea of it being, it's been really clinical up to this point, right? And you see, when you get to sentencing, that's really when the clinical aspect of it kind of goes away, right? Now it's time to let the floodgates open and talk about the emotional impact of the case. And now that he's pled guilty to these murders, it's not about the facts anymore, right? The facts aren't in dispute. He killed these people. And the question then becomes, what do we do about that? That's not a clinical question, right? That's a very emotional, personal question. And so that was kind of the whole purpose of the sentencing yesterday. And you could see how much that had an impact on Hippler. Like he's been in this case forever, right? He's been in this case since it got transferred down to Ada County. He's been dealing with all of these parties, all these back and forth, the filings, the objections, sealing, procedural stuff. And then you can tell how much this has had an impact on him throughout this whole process. And finally seeing the conclusion. The fact that he even teared up it's surprising, but this case it had a big impact on a lot of people.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. He's kind of the boss of all the district court judges, in a sense, right? He kind of hands out who gets what case and handles a lot of the administrative stuff. That means he's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. And that means he could have handed this case off to any other judge on the bench here in Ada County. As far as judges telling each other what to do, that doesn't work super well, most of it. But, he does get to decide when this case came down here, he got to decide who took it. And he stepped up and did it himself, which I think is, shows his character. He's willing to do this hard work and really step up to the bat on this case. And like you said, it shows this has had a huge impact on him.
And a lot of us have been doing this for many, many years now. A lot of us have covered both Lori Daybell and Chad Daybell and everything that went into that. We've covered gruesome stuff. We've read the police reports, which, are just awful, awful things to read. My heart goes out to every police officer, not only to go and show up to that scene, but then to be living through it, to be writing about it, rewriting about it, talking about it, testifying to what you saw. We have such a smaller part of that in reading it, digesting it, helping report it, and boy, it had an impact on all of us here in the newsroom. As a attorney, and especially you're a defense attorney, I kept looking at Ann Taylor, who was Bryan Kohberger's defense attorney, just thinking what is going through her mind right now? You've been standing here next to this guy and it's your job to defend him. But now none of that matters anymore. And now everyone is just, going full bear at your client about everything. Is there anything you think you would do on the other side of that towards like helping Kohberger get ready for that? Like, hey, this is going to be brutal, or do you just say like, hey, this is what you get now?
I mean, I think to speak first off, as far as the judge a little bit more too, is that the first purpose of sentencing is protection of the community, right? And so one of the really tricky things about being in that courtroom, whether you're a prosecutor, plaintiff, defense attorney, or anything, is really making sure you know what your purpose is there. Because when a judge is sentencing somebody, they're always trying to balance this idea of protection of the community with rehabilitation, trying to find a way of finding something redeeming about that person, because you want to give the person a kind of a something to pull themselves up to, right? Something to look up and be able to rehabilitate themselves and re-enter the community. But I think it was really powerful the way Hippler said, look, I can't find a single redeeming thing about you.
Truth be told, I'm unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger because his grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him. His actions have made him the worst of the worst. Even in pleading guilty, he is giving nothing hinting of remorse or redemption, nothing suggesting even a recognition or understanding, let alone regret for the pain that he has caused.
And when you're sitting there as Ann Taylor, right, she's an incredibly accomplished defense attorney, really, really good at her job, amazing attorney. She has had to figure out what her role is in this system. And her role here is not to protect the community. It's not to find the redeeming thing about her client. It's simply to see what she can do to provide him an effective defense, right? And that can be really hard, especially when you're dealing with somebody where, like Hippler said, there may not be a redeeming fact about this person, but that's not your job. And that can be a huge emotional toll on an attorney. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm not doing defense work anymore, right? That was hard. I did that since 2017. I've stepped into a different area of law because it is a big emotional impact on you as a person. It's hard not to eventually start to take that home and like have trouble sleeping and figure out ways of taking care of yourself. But you really do. You just have to you got to go to therapy. You got to make sure you're keeping yourself, up to speed on and doing a really good job, but also make sure that you're not putting yourself in your client's shoes, right? Because you didn't do the thing that put them there. You're not the reason they're in trouble. You're just there to see what you can do to present their story and see what you can do to save them or help them.
Well, and to uphold a very important part of our justice system, which is to hold prosecutors accountable to their actions, right?
Absolutely.
Unchecked prosecution leads to a very different set of problems in society. And so something I did want to ask you about, the plea agreement, the defense kind of approached the prosecution first and said, hey, we'd be open to a deal here.
That means they won, right? I mean, the defense won this case. I don't think anybody in the legal community thinks otherwise at this point.
Really? Break that down for me.
Yeah. So a prosecution from day one was asking for the death penalty, right? They filed for that immediately. Case ended up getting transferred down here. And since then, a case like this, you can kind of go after two different lines of defense, trying to show that there's, not evidence that this person did it, or the alternate perpetrator defense that defense was trying to push here.
Yeah.
The idea that there's just not enough evidence, right? Not that there's somebody else that did it, but just not enough evidence that our guy did it. Or option number 3, yeah, he did it, but you shouldn't kill him, right? You shouldn't sentence him to the death penalty. And we've seen a lot of cases in Ada County where they've sought the death penalty, like Chad Daybell, right? It was never given to them as an offer to take the death penalty off the table. He had to go to trial in that case because there was no alternative for them. Lori Vallow, the only reason the death penalty came off the table is at the very last second, the judge decided to take it off by their own decision, right? The prosecution did not agree to that. The fact that prosecution dropped the death penalty on the eve of trial here, that means you had a really good defense team. They negotiated well. They put themselves in a really good spot strategically with all the procedural motions they filed. And they truly did win this case.
I want to seek a little clarification on what you're saying, because I think people listening might say, what do you mean? He got 4 life sentences without parole. He's going to die in prison. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that now.
Yeah.
But like Bill Thompson was saying at the press conference, if we were to go through this trial, presumably 3, maybe 4 month long trial, where every gory detail, things you can't unsee, things you can't unhear about your child's last moments, followed by 15 years of appeals. And every time there's an appeal, there's going to be reporters like us knocking on, hey, what do you think about this appeal? How do you feel about this?
Yeah.
It doesn't go away for these families, and it never will, but it's still, that scab will be picked back open every year that there's a hearing or a commutation hearing or a appeal, or, oh, now it's at the Supreme Court level. Bill Thompson said he did not want to put everyone through that, and that he made what he thought was the best choice. Do you disagree with that? You think that the defense actually kind of out-postured him in this case?
I don't know if I'd go that far, right? Because I think that a few of the families do support this. And if the families are on board, I think this was a great resolution because, like you said, this saves them the 15, 20 years of appellate process. And I mean, I don't remember the last time we actually sentenced someone to death and then executed them in Idaho, but I think it's been a while.
We tried
with Creech, right?
With Creech, and
that didn't work.
That didn't work.
Yeah. And I know that they're building the new facility out at the prison out at Idaho to be able to use the firing squad, but who knows how quickly that's actually going to happen. And then once it does happen, there's going to be a huge appellate process. I mean, I know there are attorneys that are already looking into basically trying to file injunctions and whatnot to make sure that that does not go through. And that's, I mean, anytime you want to try to kill somebody, that's going to lead to a mountain of litigation and a mountain of work for the prosecution team and the defense team. And so this type of compromise, I think, is absolutely the right thing to do. Right? I mean, I was a defense attorney for a long time. I've never been a proponent of the death penalty. I think it's a terrible idea for a number of reasons. But one of them, economically, it costs the county and the state so much money, gobs and gobs of money. But it also, like you said, makes a mountain out of a situation that could be compromised. And so I don't mean to say that the prosecution lost, because I think that could be the exact response to what I said when I say defense won, right?
Sure.
I think absolutely both sides won, right?
Right.
But I mean that in a case like this, there has not been a successful resolution of a guilty plea like this in any of the bigger cases we've seen over the last couple of years. So that's where I'm saying I think that defense put themselves in a really, really strong position negotiation-wise coming into that trial, and that the state, they did a really good job of offering this plea agreement at just the right time, right? They offered it at the time that was seemingly like right before trial. Everybody's getting ready. They'd lost every single procedural motion they filed, and they filed,
the defense had?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they filed a ton of new stuff. They filed all this new stuff we call it a matter of first impression, which means that goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gets to look at it with fresh eyes. They don't have to look at what Judge Hippler said and give him much discretion or deference. They can look at it again and say, look, I think this was a mistake. Do it again. I think this was a mistake. Do it again, and over and over and over. And so Ann Taylor and that team had put together all of these matters of first impression.
Would an example of that, I don't want to derail you.
No, not at all.
Be the autism diagnosis as a possible defense against the death penalty? That's
definitely part of it, right?
Okay.
That, the motion to suppress the genetic genealogy, that data. I mean, that's a new way for law enforcement to do this type of investigation. And Idaho's never had a case like that that's gone to the Supreme Court. So I think that the defense team did a really, really good job of putting themselves in a position to gain enough leverage to be able to offer this, hey. And the way I think Bill Thompson put it was, defense team approached us and said he would be interested in a plea deal. What would you want out of that? And what that means to me is that there hasn't really been negotiation in the case before this, right?
Right.
So again, I don't think that prosecution lost. I just think that defense did a really clever job of presenting their case the way they did and trying to negotiate in that last second.
Wow. That's interesting. I think the plea deal caught so many of us off guard, especially being that late in the day. Did it catch you off guard as well? Or is this something maybe you've seen before, or this is a pretty rare occurrence?
I'd say this is pretty rare. I mean, you'd see usually in cases like this that there's been negotiation ongoing throughout the entire process. And then hearing that this was a last second, had not negotiated before type deal that happened, that's the part that's pretty surprising to me.
My next question for you on that is that with the plea agreement, they didn't require him to say anything other than admit his guilt. Bill Thompson kind of talked about this a little bit in his press conference, in that he didn't feel like he legally could force him to give an admission. The reason he didn't try and work that in as part of the deal, though, in some other form or fashion, was because he didn't feel like he would necessarily get a truthful response from Kohberger. And then it would just be a chance for him to get up and once again be in the spotlight. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because you can, as far as guilty pleas go, you can contract a lot of stuff into a guilty plea. And so they could have tried to put in that they want an explanation of what happened and location of the murder weapon and all that stuff as part of the guilty plea. But I think what Bill Thompson's getting at here is that what could the explanation ever be that would make this okay?
Right.
What could he say that would make this all right for the families or help the families in any way? Right. I think that Judge Hippler hit the nail on the head in the sentencing here and said that true justice here would be to put him in a box and not let him ever speak again.
I share the desire expressed by others to understand the why. But upon reflection, it seems to me, and this is just my own opinion, that by continuing to focus on why, we continue to give Mr. Kohberger relevance. We give him agency and we give him power. The need to know what is inherently not understandable makes us dependent upon the defendant to provide us with a reason, and that gives him the spotlight, the attention, and the power he appears to crave. Yet even if I could force him to speak, which legally I cannot, how could anyone ever be assured that what he speaks is the truth? Do we really believe, after all of this, he's capable of speaking the truth or of giving up something of himself to help the very people whose lives he destroyed? In my view, the time has now come to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting thing, trying to balance our human need and desire for, why did this happen?
That's the whole point of I mean, you see true crime. That's why we're doing the podcast,
right?
Is that people are obsessed with trying to understand the why of it, because it doesn't make sense. And that's part of the reason why it's interesting. And I think that even though there's people that are super against this, including some of the victims' families, I think that it's well within the prosecutor's decision-making ability to make this decision. It's a really hard decision to make. And I'm sure he's going to get a ton of backlash. I'm sure he's going to have a contested election coming up. He may not run again. Who knows? He's been doing it for a really long time. But, it's a really tough call for a prosecutor to make. I think that I'm sure that they weighed all the families' ideas and impacts about this before they decided what to do moving forward, though.
It's so tough, because especially, so the Gonsalves family has been very vocal in their opposition to this plea agreement. Every member of the Gonsalves family who got up and spoke yesterday, Olivia Gonsalves, who got up, she went viral for her whole statement because she just was, she's a badass.
I won't stand here and give you what you want. I won't offer you tears. I won't offer you trembling. Disappointments like you thrive on pain, on fear, and on the illusion of power. And I won't feed your beast. Instead, I will call you what you are: sociopath, psychopath, murderer. How does it feel to know the only thing you failed more miserably at than being a murderer is trying to be a rapper?
She went right for every flaw, every insecurity that Kohberger might have. She went right for it.
Did you truly think your Amazon purchase was untraceable because you used a gift card? If you were really smart, do you think you'd be here right now? If you're so powerful, then why are you still hiding, defendant? You see, I'm here today as me. But who are you?
And good on her. I think she provided a certain level of catharsis.
You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser. Constantly scolding, turning your nose up to grammar mistakes, nitpicking and criticizing others. You wanted so badly to be different, to be special, to be better, to be deep, to be mysterious. You found yourself thinking you were better than everyone else, and you thought you could figure out the human psyche and see through it, all while tweaked out on heroin. The truth is, the scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your f***ing ass. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had, let me take a look at my notes here because we're still kind of processing all of everything. Public passions about this case have been really high. Yeah. I'm going to say even covering Lori Daybell and Chad Daybell's case. Every major news outlet was camped in front of the courthouse yesterday. I think for both Lori and Chad, there was obviously some of that. But I mean, every major news outlet was here. Tents were butted up next to each other. Reporters from across the country were here. This was a big deal. For us, we were trying to madly get out information and video clips and whatever was happening to our sister stations across the country and keeping them updated on what's going on. How do you try and keep all of that in a box so that you can get up and go do your job, especially as an attorney, but also as a judge, as anyone related to this case?
Yeah. It was disappointing to hear, but our office had a judge meeting in chambers with the court over in Canyon County recently, where they said that they didn't like a plea agreement because they didn't like how they thought the news was going to cover their response if they followed it. And so it's really tough to see how much that kind of stuff really is impacting the judicial system and the way that attorneys do their jobs. So you know, there might not be a good answer to that there, but it's part of, I think, putting on the cloak as a judge or putting on the tie as an attorney is just realizing that when you go in that courtroom, you have a job to do. And whether it's going to make somebody upset or not doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. It's been a very difficult thing to understand since very early on in this case was two roommates survived the attack by Bryan Kohberger, but they took until the next day, several hours, to actually call 911. One of them at least was speaking about how much hate they got.
While I was still in shock, trying to process the fact that my friends were truly gone, I had been attacked by the public. I was grieving, numb, and unsure of what had happened was even real. And at the same time, I was getting flooded with death threats and hateful messages from people who did not know me at all or know the dynamic of our friendship. Social media made it so much worse, and strangers made up stories to entertain themselves. The media harassed not just me, but also my family. People showed up at our house. They called my phone, my parents' phones, other family members' phones, and we were chased while I was still trying to survive emotionally and grieve the loss of my friends.
The irony of being so mad at them that you would give them a death threat, I think really speaks to how personally people have taken this case.
Yeah.
But they went on to say they didn't really know what they saw, and they didn't necessarily believe what they saw or heard.
I thought that we were going to wake up and go upstairs, see them and tell them how they had scared us and that they were going to tease us about how we are constantly scaredy cats. I make jokes about it as we would go to Taco Bell like always. But sadly, that is not what happened and what turned out to be my worst nightmare.
It wasn't until they had woken up the next day and then realized, oh no, something's really actually wrong here. Have you ever seen anything like this as far as other victims in the case or victims in the case also being kind of the target of harassment, online threats, bullying, any of that kind of thing before?
Not nearly to this extent. I mean, this is wild, and it's really disappointing to see the way that people are victimizing the roommates, right? These people didn't do anything wrong. They were there in the house. It's not like them calling earlier would have changed anything about what happened that night.
I still carry so much regret and guilt for not knowing what had happened and not calling right away, even though I understand it wouldn't have changed anything, not even if the paramedics had been right outside the door.
I think one thing that stood out to me a lot yesterday during the sentencing hearing was that Kohberger was just flat. There was very little affect on his face, no emotion, even as people were lighting into him.
Within hours, we had your white car on the camera. We knew from the very beginning we had you. Police officers tell us within minutes they had your DNA, like a calling card. You were that careless, that foolish, that stupid. Master degree, you're a joke.
Yeah.
Family members are bawling.
I'll never be able to replace her. I just miss her so much, and I just love her more than anything. And I don't know. I just love you, Maddie, and I wish you were still here.
The courtroom is audibly crying along with them. He's just flat. It was like really looking at somebody who is really, truly evil. What do we do with that? Can you help us kind of process that a little bit as far as just being so straight-faced about all of it?
There's a song by Okkervil River called Westfall. You ever heard that one? It's about this kind of a similar situation, honestly. It's about from the perspective of the murderer. The end of the song is all these people looking at my face, trying to see if they can see the evil there, but evil doesn't look like anything, is the kind of conclusion at the end of the song. And I think that it's interesting the way that the defense team was ready for this concern throughout this case. They did a mental health evaluation of Kohberger and talked about his autism diagnosis and talked about how that does make him present with a really flat affect. He's antisocial. He does not react to things. He does not respond to stuff. He's not going to have that type of reaction you'd expect from somebody in the case. And they even talked to the judge. They wanted that to come out in their case so they could head that off and make sure prosecutors weren't talking about this flat face affect that he has.
Oh.
And so it's really interesting to think, like, it could be that that is because of the nature that he is, right? The evil that may be within him may be presenting itself in that way, but it may not be, right? We don't know that it's not a mental health diagnosis or a lack of ability to respond appropriately to outside stimuli. We don't exactly know exactly what that is, right? And you'll see interviews of other people that are psychopaths or serial killers and stuff, and they'll have similar traits where they are looking antisocial and flat affect, not moving their head much, not blinking much, not like reacting to outside stuff. And so, I think this is a tough question, and one that's probably more for a criminologist than an attorney.
Sure.
But it's interesting to see, I guess my take on it is it's interesting to see how ready defense was for that argument, right? From the get-go. Because
They've probably been seeing it
I'm sure.
as they're talking to him and,
100%.
Interacting with him, right? Like, why are you so stone-faced right now?
Because I have to tell, when you're getting a client ready for trial, you got to work on them on how to fix their face, right? That's what we always talk about. You got to fix your face. because you can't have big reactions when somebody says something bad or somebody says something good for you, but you also can't not react, right? You need to be engaged. You need to be showing the jury that you're following it. And so it's interesting. I'll bet they tried to work with him on that while they were getting ready for this and realized like, this is not going to fly.
Wow.
And they had that doctor evaluate them. And a doctor said he had autism and that was the reason why he's presenting that way. Now, the judge's decision here was, I'm not going to let you talk about the autism diagnosis until we get to the mitigation portion of the case, if they prove your client did this. And I will consider it, though, if your client testifies. So that was going to be, a game time decision for him to decide whether he was going to testify or not. Generally, you don't see people testifying in these types of cases very often.
Yeah. I've never seen a defendant take the stand, actually.
It's tough to convince a jury that your client didn't do something wrong unless they're willing to take the stand. And your client has the absolute right not to testify. And you can talk to the jury about that. You can get them to say, yes, we believe in the right to remain silent and the right not to be forced to testify. We're not going to hold that against your client. But that's a bias you walk into that courtroom with. And you think, if that guy really didn't do anything wrong, why doesn't he just stand up and tell me he didn't do it?
Right.
And that is really hard to get around as an attorney. So I've been finding, and our team, our defense team at our law firm have been finding that we have a lot better shot with our clients when they are able to testify. And again, we never force them to. It's never our decision. It's always theirs. But we do kind of help them understand that being able to tell their side of the story is really, really helpful to the jury.
Yeah, I would imagine that's always the one person you want to hear from that you never hear speak.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how you would get around that thought as a juror.
I mean, I don't imagine he would have testified in this case. But if he did, that would have been the single biggest part of the entire case, is what does he say?
Right.
Right. And I think that's, if he would have testified, that would have been the moment that everybody tuned in.
Yeah, no kidding. What happens next? Because the judge pointed this out, Judge Hippler pointed this out. They put in the plea agreement that he can't appeal, but by Idaho law, he still technically can appeal.
Correct.
Can you kind of walk through that?
Absolutely. So you see right here, I mean, I'm just looking him up on the Idaho Department of Corrections offender search. He's been moved to max already. So they moved him to max security. That's out in Kuna. And yeah, they've got him down here as a termer, which makes sense.
What is termer?
Termer just means he's never getting out.
Ah.
He's doing his full term, and he's got 4 life sentences consecutively. As far as his right to appeal, that's under Garza v. Idaho. So a number of years ago, somebody waived their right to have an appeal under a plea agreement. And then they asked their attorney to appeal their case. And their attorney said, no, you waived your right to appeal. I'm not going to do that. And then the person filed a post-conviction petition. That went up to the U.S. Court, the SCOTUS, right, Supreme Court of the United States. And in that case, Garza v. Idaho, the Supreme Court decided that you do still have the right to appeal. It may be very limited, but you have the absolute right to ask your attorney to file the notice of appeal, and that attorney is required to do so. And so what could happen within the next 42 days of, 41 days of today, sentencing was yesterday, he would have to file that notice of appeal. And that would be filed with the Idaho Supreme Court. And generally that's going to have a short summary of the things he wants to appeal. Now, I know that we talked a little bit about, and Judge Hippler even told him, if you appeal the wrong things, you may be waiving your plea agreement, you may be violating it. If you violate a plea agreement this late in the stage, they could try to, reopen the case. I don't expect that would ever happen, but it could. What would likely happen is that the Supreme Court will take the case. They'll look at the motion being filed by the petitioner, which would be his defense attorney. The respondent would be the state of Idaho, probably through the Attorney General's office. They'd say, Judge, he waived his right to appeal. Please deny this. And then it would be up to his attorney for his appeal to try and find a reason around or way around that appellate waiver. There's probably not going to be anything they could find. Like I said, the Ann Taylor team here did an incredible job in his defense. And And so, and what will likely happen there is Supreme Court just summarily denies it, says, sorry, you waived your right to have an appeal. Enjoy your time at max.
And then, barring he tries to write a book or something stupid, that's the last
It's the last we ever hear of him.
Wow. That sounds pretty good to me. I'm tired of dealing with Bryan Kohberger, to be honest.
As much as it's been fun to be down here and talk to you all the time about it, but no, I am too. This is an incredibly heavy case.
I think you and I will have to start working together on like parking ticket cases or something.
That'd be fun.
Something a little less heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been a tough one.
It has. I can't imagine how the people that were actually affected by it are dealing with it.
Yeah.
I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking.
I want to just be out in the woods with you just so I can teach you about loss and pain. I love God. I wouldn't take your life. That's up to him. But I guarantee you, you are weak.
People call me strong. They say I'm a survivor, but I don't see what my new reality looks like. The hypervigilance, the exhaustion, the way I scan every room I enter, the way I flinch at sudden sounds.
I'm shaking because I want to reach out to you, but I hope you feel my energy, okay? Go to hell.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you the moment yesterday when I started crying was when Xana's aunt got up and forgave Kohberger.
Yeah.
Always looking for the positive thing, because evil, hate can destroy people. And that's what it started doing with our family. And, this is probably going to bother everybody, but Bryan, I'm here today to tell you I have forgiven you, because I no longer could live with that hate in my heart. And for me to become a better person, I have forgiven you. And anytime you want to talk and tell me what happened, get my number. I'm here, no judgment, because I do have answers that I want you to answer. And I'm here. I'll be that one that'll listen to you. Okay? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
I might start crying again. My heart, I know your heart, all of us here have been reporting on this case since it happened. I know our hearts definitely go out to all of the survivors' families.
Yeah.
The survivors that are out there, as Judge Hippler did a really good job of saying, let's shed the moniker of victim and go forward into this, this new life ahead. Is there anything you'd like to add before we kind of wrap up?
I think that's a great point as far as the idea of shedding the idea of being a victim. Obviously, you and I can't speak to that. We don't have, of course. We haven't been where these people have been.
Yeah.
One of my very favorite judges, the first judge I ever practiced in front of on the district bench, her name was Judge Deborah Bale. She was the longest running district judge in Idaho at the time, the first woman ever appointed to the bench. Really impressive woman. And when victims would come in front of her, she would say that same thing. That was always what she would tell them, is that you can let this case continue to have power over you, or you can find a way of surviving and moving forward. And that's just going to be a lifelong process for the people that were involved in this. And like you said, it's been eye-opening to see just a tiny bit of the impact that this had on these families, and heartbreaking.
Well, as always, thank you for your help. And we will definitely be back with you again as we kind of try and process all of the document dumps and anything else legally that kind of comes down the road here. But thank you as always.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. This is Gem State, the Idaho Student Murders. I'm your host, Ryan Oswald. Please take a moment to like and subscribe wherever you are listening. It really helps us out. You can follow our continuing coverage of this case on idahonews.com. Gem State is written, produced, and edited by me, Ryan Oswald. Ryan Hawes is KBOI's news director. Mitch Hansen is our senior producer. Brian Peachers is our associate producer and fact checker. Legal support by Chase Bales. Production coordination by Anna Nicole Wadges. Special thanks to KBOI, KEYE, Como, and KVAL news stations for the use of their coverage. Pete Genesini is Director of Network Podcast Programming. Rich Cook is the head of audio at AMP Media.